what happens when British grit collides with American wholesome values? We're going to take a look at Roy and Jaie in Ted Lasso. Joining me today is Bob Bordone.
Oh, no, Bordone.
I've heard it both ways. Mended light. Bob, tell us about yourself. So my understanding is that you were a professor of erotic Twilight fan fiction at Cornell.
Close. Pretty close. I was actually a professor at Harvard Law School.
Oh, okay.
In negotiation and mediation.
And so you've got your own channel. Tell us about what you're doing.
I do. I have a channel on all things negotiation and mediation and how to resolve conflicts in ways that, make the world, but really hopefully your own life better.
So we've got relationship mediation and we've got business mediation, and we're going to be looking at some football/soccer mediation. And we're going to hand this over to Alicia because otherwise we're just going to go off the rails. Alicia's here. Hi.
Hello. I am so excited to support both of you in bringing more peace to the world.
Alicia, I usually understand you're sitting here. So thanks for letting me.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me have your chair today.
She's usually sitting here, so thanks for not sitting there today.
Okay, you got it. You got it. I think we have found a way forward on
Reserved.
that. We have found a way. Having your autonomy in space is pretty important.
It is.
In things negotiation.
But you and I are sitting quite close, and you smell fantastic.
Oh, thanks.
So this is very pleasant.
Nothing
today.
like some Old Spice.
So we're going to be watching a little bit of Ted Lasso. Some of you have seen my other channel, Cinema Therapy. My co-host Alan is always telling me to watch Ted Lasso, and I know we're going to do something bigger there at some point. But we're focusing in right now on Roy and Jaie. So who are these characters? Because I know you're super into the show.
Well, I'm just getting into the show, and Roy
but in
and
a super
Jaie,
way.
In a super way, right? So I love the show so far. I'm almost done with season 1. I'm always slow to these TV programs.
Yeah.
I like people to vet them first. But but these two characters here are they're typical, frankly, of a lot of alpha guys who get into these really unproductive conflicts.
Yeah.
And when they're on a soccer team, it's not so good. When they're world leaders, it's
horrible.
really
People die.
bad. People die.
Yeah.
People die.
And so we have Roy, who is past his prime, was a great player now, but he knows what it means to be a team player and to be a leader, and he's the team captain. And we've got Jaie, who is the showboating superstar, but he's all about him. And their two philosophies are not going so well together. So that's the setup. Alicia's going to guide us through it. But we're going to start with watching a clip of them in the locker room. Let's do this.
Okay, let's go.
I've never had like a forehead smashing.
Easy now. Coach, tell these boys what the first rule of my fight club is.
No fight club!
No fight club. You understand?
Looks like a co-mediation here.
Pistol Pete, y'all, we still got a second half to play.
For the love of Pistol Pete.
Sit down, everybody.
Gaffer saved you, old man.
Saved you, old man.
Call me old. One more time.
So Ted's the coach.
And the mediator.
Granddad.
Oh, man.
So like my first feeling after watching all that, I'm like coaching or mediating, a lot like parenting. I relate to that with my sons. Where do you think this type of division in real life, like where do you think we see this type of division?
Really, honestly, almost everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? So this is basically two people who have a huge ego, right? And pretty low conflict handling skills. And you know what's worse? What's worse here is they have an audience.
So the ego gets bigger.
Yeah,
Because
and
I can't lose in front of all the people.
Right.
right, and the need to protect it, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's higher because it's more embarrassing.
Yeah, well, and I look at this and I see ego comes from insecurity. Because if you're truly confident, I mean, people who have ego, they project this confidence. They project how great they are, and they showboat and they brag. But to me, that's incredibly insecure. Because if you're truly confident, you don't need to project it. You don't need everyone to see it. You don't need to protect it. You can accept feedback. You can accept criticism. There's no them's fighting words. It's actually incredibly confident and powerful to admit when you're wrong, to accept correction, right? To receive that sort of thing. And I see with both these guys, it's about how am I perceived?
Yeah.
And that's fragile, and I got to protect it.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I've written about and that I really see in play here is something about what we call the negotiation within, right, or the conflict within. Because it's pretty clear, what I would say analyzing this is that each of these characters, Jamie and Roy, have a pretty fragile self-concept.
Yeah.
And so...
if it's challenged, I have to defend it with force and with strength.
Absolutely.
Physically or with words.
Yeah. And so, you know, that is, I would say, a huge barrier for people in negotiations.
Right.
That their inability to handle their own self-concept, right, which is, for example, I'm a really good soccer player or a really good team player or a really good captain who sometimes does things that aren't so good or are less skillful. If they can't accept that, then the least bit of criticism leads to this kind of over-defense, which plays out across what I would say the proverbial negotiation table.
Yeah, when we limit ourselves when we refuse to receive that feedback. When we feel like we've got it figured out, we're no longer learning.
Yeah.
Right? And I think there's a great movie called 42, which is about Jackie Robinson. You've got Chadwick Boseman as Jackie Robinson. You've got Harrison Ford as his manager, Branch Rickey. And he says, so this is those who haven't seen the film, Jackie Robinson is the first black player in the major leagues. And people are spitting on him and they're shouting the N-word at him and he's not welcome. And he's wanting, you know, he's had enough and he's lashing out. And his manager is telling him he's got to rein it in. And Jackie Robinson says, you're looking for a player without the guts to fight back. And Branch Rickey says, no, I'm looking for a player who has the guts not to fight back. And it reminds me of Gandhi. Like Gandhi says when they're trying to get rid of the English and have Indian independence, he says, if we fight back, then the world can take sides. If we fight back physically, then people can say, well, this side started or that side started. If we don't fight back, if it's nonviolent resistance, the British are the bad guys. And the whole world can see that. And everyone sides with us, and that's exactly what happened. Martin Luther King followed a similar track. I've been studying Mother Teresa lately. Something she said really struck me, which is that if you're truly humble, nothing can touch you, neither praise nor criticism. If they praise you, you won't put yourself on a pedestal, right? And if they criticize you, you won't take it to heart because you know what you are. And I see these two guys, and there's a lot of fire in their blood because they can't stand to be challenged, right?
Yeah, I mean, so much of their self-concept is about the praise that they get, and in this case, right, about the way in which the other team players look up to them or don't.
Right.
And so part of what makes this conflict in this moment feel so stressful to them, that it breaks out in violence, is that it's playing out around these teammates.
Yeah.
And their whole sense of who they are rests on this.
Yeah.
And so I think what you're saying, right, is very much from I would say, a negotiation analytic perspective. The work that they need to do before they can do anything more productively across with each other is actually interior. And to have, I would just say, a more complete and nuanced sense of who they are, of their value, of what they bring to the table. One person was a superstar. And he's
got the experience.
And he has
got
experience.
Yeah. And Jamie's like, I've got the talent, so I don't need to listen to you.
That's right.
And the fact is, he's going to torpedo his own career if he keeps that up.
That's exactly right. And so in some sense, right, there's a real opportunity here that's being missed because they could each really learn from each other.
Yeah.
But they can't do that if, again, they haven't done their own internal conflict work.
So I've taken one of his negotiation classes, and I super enjoyed it. And it was from the perspective of business, right?
She's fangirling so hard.
Oh, that's really kind of you. I mean, this is great.
But like, it was so fascinating to me while I was taking this business negotiation class. So many of the themes laid right over conflict resolution that we teach in our therapy clinic. And in one of our courses, we talk about people's different personalities and what they innately value. And then because of what they value, what they tie their worth to, right? Which is their identity, their self-conceptualization. And it's like that shows up whether we're talking about interpersonal relationships or whether we're talking about business. Like that is who we are. That is how we show up in the world. But it also keeps us stuck, right? If we're not willing to explore that area, and they can become huge boulders, huge challenges in our growth, in our professional careers, or, in trying to create world peace, right? When we see that in our personal lives or in business or team or leadership, because they show up both places, what do we do? How do we address that?
I think we start with the self work is how much do you know about yourself already? Mm-hmm. What are your rough edges? If you have any sort of self-awareness, you know at least where some of the landmines are. and having the humility to say, these are mine. That just because I feel like somebody else stepped on the landmine, I'm the one who put it there, or at least it's there in me. It's not there because of them. Right. And we often want to see ourselves as good, and if we behave in a way that we're embarrassed by, we justify it by doing this, like what I call a step into an apology and then a hard left into blame. Like, I'm sorry I got so mad, but you shouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Instead of just owning, look, it's two separate things. If your behavior was out of line, then I can call you on that. But I shouldn't have responded the way I did, period. And I was out of line, and I'm sorry. Yeah. Right?
You know, in my field, we call that switch tracking.
Switch tracking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about what you did, or you're talking about what I did, but I want to switch it to what you did.
Yeah.
Right? And now we're going to have a competition over who is the worst person.
We want someone to be left holding the bag, and it's not going to be us. And it takes, back to the Mother Teresa idea, like it takes true humility to just sit with your complexity. These are my virtues, these are my rough edges. Yeah. And most of us like to live in the space where we're comfortable, where we shine, where we excel. And to answer your question, I know in my life personally, it's stepping up to the challenge of, instead of, well, I am how I am, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, I'm going to live in my strengths, of actually taking a long, hard look at the weaknesses and wanting to be better. And that's what I really like about the character of Ted Lasso, is he is constantly believing that the people around him can be better, including himself.
He's setting that example of humility and accountability.
Yeah, and that he always does the work on himself first. So when he asks people to follow suit, they're not calling BS.
So if you were to go in and you were to mediate Roy and Jaie, what would that look like? Or if you were to give Ted Lasso some advice, because he's basically the nonstop mediator.
Yeah, so, I think where Ted Lasso is brilliant is that he has this just comfort in who he is, that you were really speaking of, Jono. And so that I would say keep doing. The setup here, maybe not so great, right? Because in some level, the issues that are in play are these two characters' ego, right? They see issues like status and role as zero sum. Yeah. Right? The more I have of it, the less you have. The better role you have, the less of a role I have. And that is fundamentally actually not true. But when we play the mediation out in front of all the peers, it actually raises the stakes. Yeah. And so I want to say to Ted, okay, first thing you got to do, which you do well, it seems, is stop the violence. But then the next step is...
First rule of my fight club is there is no fight club.
No fight club. No fight club, right? Then the second thing, right, is how do I give each of these people in this moment a face-saving way out of what they have put themselves in, which is a pretty difficult situation where their status and role is being challenged in the room. And then the next step, right, which we don't necessarily get to see in this clip, but I would say is now you've got to talk to them offline, not in front of everybody.
Yeah. And I look at this like Jaie, his ego, his identity is wrapped up in his talent as a superstar. And Roy's identity is tied up in his ability to lead. And as long as Jaie is showboating and being a one-man show, Roy can't lead. And as long as Roy is trying to tell Jaie what to do, Jaie feels controlled and he can't be a superstar. And helping them both see, Roy, if you allow Jaie some room to let his talent shine, that actually accentuates you as a leader. Jaie, if you allow Roy to bring his experience to the fold and to help make you more of a team player, more of a complete player, your legacy will shine brighter. That these aren't mutually exclusive goals.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we talk about in my field, there's these 5 kind of core emotional interests. And that whenever you see negative emotions playing out, it means one of these interests isn't being met. Yeah. And you just touched on one of the really most important ones, which is autonomy. Yeah. Right? As soon as I feel that my autonomy I don't have it anymore, you've taken it from me, you're going to see negative emotionality. Yeah. So giving some people some space, right? 2 of the others, right, I mentioned our role. Like, how do I get a good role in this interaction? Yeah. And how do I get some status in this interaction? Yeah. The other ones, right, are appreciation. Like, what's kind of missing here is the appreciation of what each of them brings to the table. Yeah. And so in some sense, right, all of these core emotional interests aren't being met here. And that gives Ted Lasso, right, an opportunity, if he could see these and then think about how can I meet these core emotional concerns of the parties.
Yeah.
And then how can I help them see how they can meet each other's needs? Suddenly what can feel like really zero sum, I mean, is definitely not zero sum.
Yeah.
Right? And transforms the whole team.
Then the sum becomes more than the parts, right?
Yeah.
This has been wonderful to talk about. We've got to wrap up,
Yes.
guys.
It has been fun. I think I'm going to sit on this chair more often.
We like it.
If that's okay with you.
Oh, totally.
This chair,
Totally fine.
not this chair.
No, not that chair.
My question for you, Bob, is this dynamic happens all the time in families, in business, in world leadership. Like, they've broken up the fight, but it hasn't really been resolved. What do you do next?
So I think we should answer that question right now on my channel.
Link is right here. You're going right now. You know you are. Do it.
Do it.
Pleasure having you here, and it'll be a pleasure being on Bob's channel. Let's do this.
Thanks for having me. Can't wait.
I told you, there's Bob's video. What should they do with that, Bob?
Click on it right now.
There we go.
See you on my channel.